Hello, everybody. Anthony Aniano here from RotoBaller Radio and RotoBaller.com with your 2023 Fantasy Football Week 5 Sleeper and Value Plays. Some players under the radar for your season-long leads, maybe a little less expensive in your DFS formats, and some players we'll take a look at that fit that profile for Week 5 of your Fantasy Football season. Don't forget, head over to RotoBaller.com right now. Sign up today for the Premium Pass. Use the promotional code ACES and save at checkout. Whether season-long or season-wide or DFS formats, RotoBaller.com has you covered. Lineup optimizers, team sync tools, waiver wire report, trade analysis, you name it. RotoBaller.com, the place to be. Like I said, use that promo code ACES to save at checkout. Like and subscribe right here to the RotoBaller YouTube channel, and download the RotoBaller app. It's free. 6 sports all in the palm of your hand. Whatever it is you're looking for, season-long DFS, sports betting, you name it. RotoBaller.com has you covered, all right? Full disclosure, recording this on Thursday night, October 5th, right before kickoff of the Thursday night matchup. Reminder, 4 teams on a bye for Week 5 as we start the bye-week fantasy fiascos. No Cleveland Browns, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Los Angeles Chargers, or Seattle Seahawks, all right? And my quarterback for the bye week, for the Week 5 sleeper and value playing, maybe you need a bye-week replacement. Maybe it's Deshaun Watson. Maybe it's Justin Herbert. Maybe it's Geno Smith. Maybe it's Baker Mayfield in a 2QB league, whatever it may be. But Zach Wilson, this week, against a Denver Bronco defense, at the very least, has me intrigued. So I said, all right, what is he going for on DraftKings? And he's going for 4,900 on DraftKings. And I said, all right, what was his point total last week on DraftKings against the Kansas City Chiefs? And it was 20.2 fantasy points. For the first time in Zach Wilson's career last week, Zach Wilson looked like a competent NFL quarterback. And this week, Zach Wilson is playing the Denver Broncos and their defense, a Broncos defense that is ranked 32nd in the league against opposing quarterbacks. A Broncos defense that allows 302.5, also known as 302.5, passing yards per game. A Bronco defense that allows 29.3 fantasy points per game to opposing QBs and have already allowed, in 4 games, have already allowed 13 passing touchdowns. And then you look back on the first 4 weeks of the season. Justin Fields, who had been terrible all season long, Denver allowed Justin Fields 32.9 fantasy points. Tua had his best game of the season in Week 3 against Denver, 31.4 fantasy points. Week 2, Sam Howell, 21.3 fantasy points. And Week 1, Jimmy Garoppolo of the Raiders, 23.7 fantasy points. The floor for the Denver Bronco pass defense for a quarterback right now is 21.3 fantasy points. I know it's outrageous to consider Zach Wilson, but I will drop him in some DFS tournaments. And if I'm desperate for a bye week replacement, the matchup favors Zach Wilson, Garrett Wilson, and that Jets offense. At the running back position, I have 3 of them for you this week. Gus Edwards of the Baltimore Ravens leads the charge against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Gus Edwards sits at 5,000 on DraftKings, averaging 7.4 fantasy points per game. He goes against the Steelers defense that is 27th in the league against opposing running backs. 148.5 rushing yards per game allowed by that abysmal Steelers defense. They're allowing 23.2 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs in a PPR format, with a total of 3 touchdowns to the position, 2 on the ground, 1 through the air. My second sleeper and value play, more of a value play than a sleeper. I don't think we can call Breece Hall a sleeper, but priced at $5,400, it's a nice price on DraftKings for a running back who was drafted early, who's averaging 8.3 fantasy points per game, and this is the big winner for me, who his head coach, Robert Saleh, put the stamp of approval on and said, starting Week 5, there's no limitations on Breece Hall. He's no longer on a pitch count. He is back to being the workhorse running back of the New York Jets. Now, Dalvin Cook is still there, but let's be honest, Dalvin Cook has done absolutely nothing. Breece Hall is not only the future running back of the Jets, he is the present running back of the Jets. And picking on that Denver defense, well, that's a path to victory. Not only did Tua go off in week 3, but so did Devin Achane and Raheem Mostert. Not only did Justin Fields go off in week 4, but so did Khalil Herbert. In week 4, Khalil Herbert over 100 rushing yards. In week 3, Achane and Raheem Mostert, each with multiple touchdowns, both through the air and on the ground. In week 2, Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders, 87 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. In all of these matchups, both the quarterback and the featured running back was able to have fantasy success. I'm betting on that Jet offense being able to do the same against that Bronco defense in week 5. Now, my asterisk, my third running back, and I normally don't give you 3, but today I'm going to, is with the Denver Broncos. Javonte Williams, at this moment on Thursday, is listed as questionable with the hip injury. Not considered serious. We see if he plays Sunday against the Jets. If he is out, and that's the caveat, if Javonte Williams is out on Sunday, Jaleel McLaughlin, the rookie, the undrafted rookie free agent, is a sneaky little play this week at a $5,000 price tag. Last week, coming in, he finished with 19.4 fantasy points for the Broncos in a PPR format and a DraftKings format, going against the Jet defense that, granted, has only allowed 1 touchdown all year to the running back position. However, Jet defense is allowing 148 rushing yards per game. Last week, Isaiah Pacheco totaled 158 yards. I believe it was 43 through the air for Pacheco and about 115 on the ground. Jet defense is allowing 22.8 PPR points per game to opposing running backs. Pacheco is the 1 touchdown scored against that Jet defense. But again, the deal with Jaleel McLaughlin, it's in a little asterisk next to him. Javonte Williams plays. I can't trust Jaleel McLaughlin. Got to see how that workload shakes out. However, if Javonte Williams is out, Jaleel McLaughlin at $5,000. And think about what you could do. You go Gus Edwards and McLaughlin for $5,000 each in the DraftKings format. You could double up that game. Breece Hall and McLaughlin at $5,400 and then another $5,000. All right. At the wide receiver position, Zay Flowers of the Baltimore Ravens against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Reasonably priced at $5,500 and averaging 12.4 fantasy points per game. We don't know the status of Bateman and Odell Beckham just yet. Zay Flowers continues to be Lamar Jackson's favorite wide receiver weapon, and he goes against that Pittsburgh defense. It's a theme this week. We're picking on Denver and we're picking on the Steelers. Zay Flowers against Pittsburgh. Steelers 30th in the league against opposing wide receivers, allowing 272.8 passing yards per game and an astronomical 46.8 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers, with 6 touchdowns already allowed through 4 games to the wide receivers. That's tied for the most wide receiver touchdown allowed in the league. My second wide receiver to mention, he's in the bargain bin, but Rashee Rice of the Kansas City Chiefs against the Minnesota Vikings. Only 3,600 on DraftKings, averaging 8.2 fantasy points per game. He's got 2 games already this season with 10 or more fantasy points in a DraftKings format, averaging 35 receiving yards a game. The key for Rice is getting in the end zone. 2 times he's got in the end zone, he's giving you those 10-plus fantasy points. But I like this matchup against the Minnesota Vikings for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs' passing offense. Minnesota is 32nd, dead last in the league against opposing wide receivers. Minnesota allows 256 passing yards per game, and another huge number, 48.4 PPR points per game allowed to opposing wide receivers. They've allowed 5 touchdowns to the wide receiver position this year. Somebody with Kansas City's wide receiver room is going to hit. My bet is on Rashee Rice. And finally, my sleeper value play at the tight end position, Hayden Hurst of the Carolina Panthers against the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions are 31st in the league against opposing tight ends. In a PPR format, they allow 17 fantasy points per game to the tight end position, although only 1 touchdown to opposing tight ends. Hayden Hurst is a dirt cheap $3,100 on the season, this week I should say, and he has averaging 6 points per game in a DraftKings format on the year. All right, everybody, so to recap, my Week 5 sleeper and value plays for your fantasy football season. At quarterback, Zach Wilson against the Denver Broncos. Running backs, Gus Edwards against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Breece Hall also against the Denver Broncos. The asterisk, if Javonte Williams is out, Jaleel McLaughlin of the Denver Broncos against the Jets also fits that sleeper value play mold. At the wide receiver position, Zay Flowers of the Ravens against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Rashee Rice of the Kansas City Chiefs against the Minnesota Vikings. And finally, Hayden Hurst of the Carolina Panthers against the Detroit Lions. All right, everybody, as always, give me a follow on Twitter, and we'll see you next time right here on RotoBaller Radio.